Hey, this is Ryan Plunkett. I'm a magician in Chicago. I'm good friends, I would say, with Jonathan Pritchard, and we're here to talk about magic. I don't know. Short, sweet, to the point.
How did you get started in magic? What's your story there?
I got a magic kit when I was about 5. I think I was homesick from school one day, and I learned the cups and balls. And then it kind of progressed from being a toy, something that we liked doing as a kid, to something that was more serious. In middle school, my dad started taking me to magic conventions. Texas Association of Magicians Conference. I'm sure you know that one well. Yeah, there you go.
TAOM in the
TAOM.
house.
So that was like our father-son yearly. If I was good, I can go to the convention kind of thing. And so that just kind of kept going. And then in high school, I worked doing magic at an independent league baseball stadium. I worked at a magic shop in Fort Worth, Texas. And then, in college, just kept studying, kept practicing, moved to Chicago, and you know, kept going. I don't know. It's funny. I kind of fell ass backwards back into it. I moved to Chicago to do theater as a theater person, and then the magic just kind of reconsumed, took control.
You thought you could get away.
You, I always joke that you never leave magic for long. It always crawls its way back into your life.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Hmm.
Like, I'll go do something else, and then, wait a minute, this would be perfect for magic.
Yeah, I think you're meant to do something when you can't stop thinking about it. I think that's probably a good
Yep.
indicator.
So, what flavor stuff are you interested in? Are you mainly a stage guy, up close guy? What's your flavor?
Well, for a long time, I would only do close-up magic. It's the only thing I was interested in. It's the only thing I cared about. It's the only thing I would study, practice. And I guess out of necessity, that's how a lot of people are because, it's so easy to have a deck of cards and to learn a trick and, you know, pour through books and be able to do all of the tricks in the book because they're all card tricks. But the more that it's become like a part of me and a career and, a job basically, the more I've started to fall in love with, you know, back in love with parlor magic and stage magic and, doing stuff at the lounge kind of pushes me to, do less close up and more stand up stuff. So these days I'm pretty tuned
Hmm.
into to stuff that would work on stage or stuff that would work for a bigger crowd.
What was the vibe like going from mainly doing close up to, boy, I need to put together a stage show because these opportunities are popping up and I'd be able to reach more people?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I'm definitely glad that I started out as a close-up magician. You definitely, you know, sharpen your chops and it's trial by fire doing close-up. And there's less stress on doing close-up, especially when you're first learning magic, because your audience is 4 people, right? So you can go out there and try anything you want to, knowing that 4 people might be the biggest, you know, biggest audience letdown you have. But yeah, definitely, it's you really the scrutiny is a lot higher. Doing close up, you really learn how to manage people, manage the effect. So I'm glad I started as a close-up magician and transitioned into doing parlor stuff. The thing that, the stage really teaches you is that clarity has to be 200%. It has to be more clear than what you could get away with in a close-up effect. Um, in close-up, you're kind of dealing with multiple points of view from the audience, less in the sense of like what they think, but where they are in the room. Whereas opposed to the stage, you kind of have one collective point of view. So you can start thinking about methods differently. You can think about, what works in close up doesn't work in stage, and what works in the concept and the frame of the show on stage doesn't, necessarily work in close up. So there's a shift in thinking that has to happen and a shift in method that has to happen. And I'm really drawn to parlor stuff and the stage stuff because of, my theater background. I'm a lighting and sound designer. So in college, they really train you to look at the stage picture as a whole, and how do you make small improvements over time? How do you have like a fine-tooth comb and you're constantly ironing out different things that you can see as a part of the stage picture to make it better, right?
What is it that you want your audiences walking away remembering about you or believing about what you did? Like what's the fundamental thing you're trying to get across to your audiences?
I think that's the million-dollar question, Jonathan. um, for me, you know, right now these days, primarily my job is to let you have a good time. I want to show you some amazing stuff. I don't think any of us claim real powers anymore. I think it's all about showcasing a theatrical representation of some crazy shit that's going to happen over the next 30 minutes, right? Uh, so it's less magic as fiction, but it's more of, I want to come across as charming. I want to come across as interesting. I think the best compliment is somebody saying, we felt like we got to know you, or we felt like we were friends after the show, right? Um, and I think parts of your personality slips out into your show. I don't have these big soliloquies telling them about, drawn out stories, but you sprinkle little nuggets of your personality and of your history and your story throughout your show. I think that's what I've been most focused on, is presenting something that's charming, uh fooling, but mostly fun.
And I've appreciated how the material that you're picking, you're using them as tools to connect with your audiences rather than making the trick the point of the whole thing. It's not so much about the knuckle busting, even though your chops are crazy, it's not the focus on what you're doing when you're in front of an audience.
Yeah, I think as a magician, there are points where sleight of hand can be showcased, um especially in course of a show, but I also think the marker of a good magician is often the restraint of sleight of hand and the option to choose better methods than brute. I often see sleight of hand as kind of the brute force way of doing something, especially these days, because there are usually sneakier, more clever, fooling ways that you can go about it besides sleight of hand. It takes more work, it's way more effort, and the move might not happen in the point where a sleight would happen. Mentalism is all about this. It's reframing something you did an hour ago. So you're a
Yep.
great person to talk about this, right?
Basically, it is about going the long way around can often be the best way
Hmm.
because you're not having to do the hard work in front of the eyes of the audience. To me, it is much better to do more work before the show than during the show. And
Yeah,
that tends to be a good way to do
I
it.
very much agree with that. And it's funny because whenever I go out and I do shows, especially parlor stuff, behind in the green room, I have just a spread of, it looks like a Staples threw up in the green room. It's just like glues and paper clips and all, I won't start naming props because it'll get stuff away, but all sorts all sorts of stuff. And it's always like the running bit, like I'm working so hard. I think I added up the cost per set of how much like expendables there are. I think it came out to like $8 a show or something. It's just like stuff that you have to make and use once and then throw away.
So yeah, it adds up real quick. So then you're walking in with so much stuff.
Uh-huh.
Staples throws up in the green room, and then during the show, it looks
It
like you're
looks like you
using one
use like
pencil, maybe two
right,
envelopes, and a deck of
a couple
cards. Like
things.
that's it.
Yeah.
Like why do you need three duffel bags full of crap when you walk in? So when you are doing those kind of parlor gigs, like you've been working with some pretty solid corporate clients, right? Like names that folks would recognize, that kind of a thing. So how are you being trusted by companies that do a lot of business?
Here's what I'll say. Most of that kind of work is for me still close-up work. Most of my parlor work, uh, the way I like doing is I like doing the venues. So a lot of it happens at the Magic Lounge. A lot of it happens at, I go do these other theater, the Magic Castles, the Mystique Dinings, the House of Cards, those kinds of places. That's a lot where I've been really testing out a lot of the parlor stuff. And it's mostly just because I find it to be more fun that way. You know, uh I have, I won't go into it, but I have plans on doing, other parlor stuff that aren't in those spaces, but for me it's those are just the best audiences, the best circumstances for a parlor show. Um, a lot of my private work is still close up, and I like that, right? It keeps me doing both of them, but in the capacity that I like doing them. And I'm lucky enough that I can be kind of picky about where I want to do it, right?
And also, you do look the part of somebody I would trust with money, right? Like that, that's not a small part of it because you're always well dressed, sharp, and you look put together.
When I first moved to Chicago, I got a job at a suit store solely so I could start getting suits so I could have something to wear at gigs, right? Like it was all the part-time job was to fulfill the thing that I needed for what I wanted to be doing, right? And you're totally right. If you don't look the part, well then you're not going to get the you got to look like what the clientele wants to purchase. I guess is a nice way of saying it. You have to look like you can be trusted with the investment that your show costs to bring in, and you know people are paying good money for you, right? So you need to deliver. You need to be able to be trusted with it. I don't know.
I think that's one of the bigger pieces of the puzzle that often goes undiscussed when it comes to magic as a
Business.
enterprise, as a
It
business
is hard.
is yeah.
It is tough. Yeah, I will say that I'm still getting better at it. I've read some great books on it and had some great advice, but the main thing is if you do enough of this, if you don't have a client relations manager, get one, right? If you're trying to manage all of your events and your inbox and all of that, you're wasting your time. Like start automating stuff and it'll come back to you tenfold. I would say that's the quickest, easiest piece of advice I could give you.
There are two huge assumptions under that, which is one, your experience that you're selling is worth it.
Hmm.
So that's always the first assumption, is that you are at a level that it would be moral to charge money for it.
Hmm.
So like the practicing in front of an audience is not a good thing to do. And then two, that you look professional, and that could be whatever, just as long as it's respect for your audience enough to respect yourself enough to show up looking the part. And then now you can go promote it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to deliver what you're selling. However good you can sell it, you have to be able to deliver the product. And so you just have to be very reasonable with what you think you're worth and what you think, what audience you think deserves to have you, right? Not everybody is meant for every audience and not every client is meant for you, right? So you have to just kind of be very, magicians are hard about this too. You have to be very realistic about, where you're at and what you're worth and what your time is worth,
Yep.
right? If it costs you more to take off to do this show, well then your time is worth that much at least. Like don't lose money to go do a thing.
So doing that cost benefit analysis and then investing in yourself, your show, your look to be worth that investment is rock solid. So then when you are kind of doing that math and putting together your show, how then are you structuring the experience? Even as close up, how is it that you're picking your material for the audience?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the crowd. Not always do you get it right. I think the first time I did the Mystique Dinings, I did the one in Utah. very Mormon culture, was producing bottles of whiskey and cigars. Maybe that was a miscalculation. It was a good show, but whatever. Uh, you you go off of, size will tell you a lot, the location. One great tip is if you're doing a lot of, private work, Zillow is your best friend. Go look up their Zillow listing, see what their house is worth, see how much space they have. You see what you're try to Facebook them, like Google them, see where if you've worked with this event planner before, see what other types of things they do. Just see what these types of people are, but mostly the environment will tell you what you're going to do. If you're strolling from table to table, well, you want to stay pretty lightweight. You know that you're not going to do more than, the average encounter might be 5 minutes, right? If you get them on the hook, maybe you can keep them for 10 minutes. Maybe you can build a crowd and hold everybody for 20 minutes, right? But to have 200 tricks in your pocket does you no good. Have a deck of cards, have some coins, have the five things that you can bounce through all night. People won't see the same thing a bunch of times, right? But also know that once you grasp the attention, you have to hold it, right? You have to maintain it. You have to have more than just what you came to open with, right? So in that case, strolling is pretty free form. You know, you take a bag of tricks and then you kind of assess when you get there. Have a backup show in case you need it, right? Whereas like in Parlor, you plan the show that you think fits the room the best. And if it's multiple shows, then you bring a few extra things to adjust if you need to, right? That's what I would say about that.
What are some of your interests and inspirations beyond the world of magic? Where do you go to mine ideas for your work?
Music, uh, love collecting vinyl records and listening to music. And I used to play drums growing up, not so much of a musician anymore, but just love reading lyrics and listening to music. And I love the physical act of collecting vinyl. Also, it's a nice subculture world, digging through record bins, trying to find stuff that you cherish for whatever reason. Maybe it's something you heard as a kid, or maybe it's something you have never heard of but you want to try. There's something exciting about the discovery of all that, the tangibility of something that's so intangible these days. That's what's nice. For me, magic is like a great example of something that is uh kind of ever present, but rarely is it tangible. And only when it's
Mm-hmm.
tangible is it really something, you know? So I like the idea of, you know, magic as an analog art, kind of foregoing the digital realm. People who make, digital magic, I'm not knocking any of that. I think it's great. But for me, it's like the absence of technology, kind of the revert of, this is a piece of wood and a string, and here's this amazing thing that it does. I think, your phone is magic, but what about that inanimate, that analog thing sitting over there? That's magic too.
Do you do any kind of frozen moment stuff, leave behind that becomes a prized possession?
Mm.
Like signed cards, man. People come back years
It's
later and
true.
go, "Wait a minute, I saw you," and then they pull it out of their purse. So, do you intentionally build that into any of your work?
In the parlor show, I have actually a pile of them sitting next to me. That's funny. I take the time. I do a thing where I have a sealed card inside of an envelope. It's been the opener that I've done for a while, but I take the time to make uh actual envelopes. So I have like a wax seal with my initial on it. You know, it's
Oh, that's cool.
it's got the day of the week usually on it. It's a part of the show, but it's like it feels like a little keepsake. I have a couple things like that, but nothing that I really like. Nothing that's substantial. I don't leave them with anything like a twisted up fork, which maybe it's a good idea. Yeah, I wanted to when I was doing a lot of like cigars. I don't do much cigar stuff anymore, but I wanted to get like cigar bands made with my initials on. Just like I feel like the small details are the things that people really appreciate. you know. Shows that you've actually taken the time to really consider every minute aspect of it.
Right. I mean, you've worked for years to make that card move perfect, and there are 1,000 details about that one move. Why wouldn't you pay attention to the show details
Hmm.
about what your audience is going to be seeing? Right. We work so hard on the stuff that the audience never sees, and it's almost like the stuff the audience does see, we don't even think about it until after.
Yeah, and it's such a give and a take. I really understand the want to show off the sleight of hand and just show off the secret. And I don't I try not to put almost anything on the internet. I'm not on TikTok. I don't post a lot of, clips of me doing stuff on Instagram, but I see all of these people who are, just exposing secrets or just showing moves or just showing the sleight because they want the credit for it. And you have to, I guess, realize that as a magician, that often isn't where the credit should be coming from, right? That's the
Yep.
thing you're supposed to be keeping secret and hiding. You're supposed to be keeping secret and hiding.
Yeah, it's kind of that same vibe that makes a lot of kind of what you're talking about, those slights. It's like I've worked so hard that the audience doesn't appreciate how hard I've worked. So I'm going to make this look like I'm working hard, and they won't know what's happening, but they'll know that something is happening that I worked hard at making, and that's how I'll be appreciated.
That I have no, it's a fine line, right? Like that I have almost no problem with, right? It's like, but there has to be a payoff of some sort. Like, I guess an example would be doing torn and restored handkerchief, where you have a phase where you expose how the first phase works, but only because you get another kicker of, you know, of fooling them with that fake explanation. Like silk to egg is another great sucker effect that's just like that, right? Pseudo explanation to
Yep.
get to a bigger climax. But I
Right.
think that's separate from what we're talking about with like digital magic in some senses.
Yep. So when you are kind of working through the show, working through material that you're putting together, one thing I've always appreciated about your work is the work that you've created. Me, I'm I don't see myself as a creator.
Hmm.
I can take something and then go have fun with it in a way that a lot of people can't. So I'm like, okay, that's my little area of the playground. I'll stay over there. But I've always been impressed by folks that can come up with solid material. So you've put out effects, you've written books about magic and that kind of a thing. So walk me through the motivation behind putting out material and also where that stuff comes from.
I guess it depends. A lot of it comes from, just tinkering. A lot of the stripper deck stuff came from when I was younger. I worked at a magic shop demoing a lot. I would go to these magic conventions and, it stemmed from when I graduated high school, my friend gave me a card cutter and just a no nonsense cheap card cutter. And I started making my own stripper decks, and I thought it was fascinating that like adding the smallest amount of work to the deck could let you do almost anything. And so I kind of became obsessed with that, and I sat on those tricks for a long time, and tinkered. This is a weird little detour with a stripper deck. You can just do your normal card magic, but then, like in the course of doing a move, you notice that, well, oh, when I did that move, two cards turned around at that location in the deck. Well, I wonder if you could, you know, then do this, and then because of that exploit, you can, get this information, or you stumble upon those discoveries naturally just by toying with stuff. So being good at taking somebody else's thing and having fun with it is the first step to making your own stuff. By incremental changes, eventually you have something that's wholly unique and that's not where you started, right? Like you don't have to have this brain blast moment of now I have this perfect, amazing trick. Well, it's that's not what creating is. It's all incremental. It's all, it's all a slow process. 80% of it's garbage, 10% of it is impractical, and 10% of it makes it to the show or whatever, you know? So it's just about constant toying and constant refinement, I would say.
And then what was the conversation with yourself about
Why to release
putting a
it?
book together?
I think it was more, one, I love magic books. We're both sitting in front of a wall of magic books, right? Like, part of you is like, well, how cool would it be to make one of those, right? So that's part of it. It has to be part of it, or else why would you do it? So, 5% of it is allowed to be vanity, just wanting to do it. But a lot of it has to stem also from genuinely wanting to share it. Whereas I don't share, I historically don't share well in other senses. So being able to control the output of what I want to share seemed really appealing to me, and being able to do it on my own terms. The stripper deck book also came because, I was doing all this material and I blossomed a friendship with somebody else. And, it just made sense that we wanted to work on this project together. We wanted to share our ideas through this medium. It could be anything. It could be making downloads. It could be putting out a physical trick. It's all got its challenges. It's all worth doing, but it all has to be from the idea that you genuinely want to share something or your perspective on a thing, you know?
Makes sense,
Yeah.
because I wanted to ask, because a lot of folks kind of have the next great American novel inside of them. They're convinced, but then never actually get around to making it. Or they're like, oh, I would like to, but, and then fill in reason.
Yeah. Writing a book is effing hard, pal. Like, it sucks. It's grueling. It's not fun. It's endless. Like, it took me and Michael 5 years to write that stripper deck book and get it published. That's a lot of time to focus on one thing. So yeah, I totally understand the want and the desire to just start a thing and then never finish it. But like, what's the you know how do you what good is that to you?
Right,
It all
right.
has to happen in steps, right? Like, we'll never start it unless you just start it. So one day, just write down half a page. If you have if you have the intro to a trick that you want to write down, just write that down. If you have, this weird ace production that you've always wanted to write down, just write it down. Like, not everything you write has to make it. You'll drop a lot of stuff along the way. That's what editing's for, right? But if you truly think that you have unique things to share, well, find a way to package it together and find a way to write it. You just have to start doing it. That's the only secret. It's like the secret to being good at magic is to just do magic a lot and be critical about the magic you do, right? Don't just do it a lot, but do it a lot, you know, but focused.
Right. Always evaluating the level of quality that you're
Mhm.
putting out.
Yeah, that's the only secret to being good, is to do it the most. Yeah, you can often get lost in endless spider webs of table of contents. Well, I could put these things together here, and then I could group all of these things together here. But if I talk about this, well, then I have to talk about this and this. Or if I talk about this, then I really should be going into this, this, and this. But doing all of that, that's important. You should do that. But, by obsessing over that, you never write a word.
Because you're trying to edit while you're trying to create. And if you don't create, you don't have anything to edit.
Mhm.
So do one, then the other.
Yeah. Hemingway always said, write drunk, edit sober. So if, if it worked for Hemingway, it'll work for anybody else. You hear that, children?
So for putting it all together, right? That's always been the one piece that impresses me the most, of like on page 114 saying, oh, and then on page 134 we'll talk about that later, and like how specific it can get, but then how early does that specificity come into play? Is it kind of
Comes in at the
like,
last moment. It only comes in once
right,
it's laid out, right? Like, you can't know what page a thing is on until the moment it's on a page.
because you could talk about it, but then you won't know how much you're talking about it, but then how much you talk about it pushes where it is farther down in the book. So yeah, and keeping track of all of that, did you have another document of self-referential stuff of where each thing was showing up? Like the logistics of keeping all that together, it's easy to lose track of that.
Yeah, but also that's what copy editors are for. Like that's what a publisher is for. They're there to help you with those things, right? Your job is to make sure that the manuscript is solid. They're there to make sure that it's a package deal, right? That it has all of those final touches on it. You know what I mean?
And kind of bottom line, was it worth putting stuff out? Because there are some folks who go, you know what, the critical nature of these speculations from people who didn't even engage with the work, I'm not even going to put stuff out anymore. The people who know I'm cool, I'll keep talking to them, and I'll be some underground force that nobody knows about. So, what was the experience of kind of putting yourself on the map like?
Is it financially worth it to put out a magic trick book? It is not. Is it um will everybody always love it blanket, will there be blanket love? Well, not necessarily. Will there be blanket hate? Not necessarily. Like, you know, by putting out multiple things, you're going to be building an audience of people who see and trust the way you view magic, right? And so the more you do it, the more you have to just understand that the audience that connects with you will support you and that nothing else matters.
I'm really interested in your ideas and thoughts about standing ovations, right? Is that a thing you specifically work towards? Is it a nice cherry on top? Is it something that you need to have happen? Is it something that you consciously work to make happen? What's your take on that?
I don't know if I have as great of a take on this as some others might. Uh, though I will say when somebody is working for it, you can feel it. When it's genuine, you can feel it. There are ways of structuring to make it more likely, but it's also a fine line. Like I've seen people ask for standing ovations, and I've seen people get them, unexpectedly. It also depends on the house and the venue and the person before you or the person after you. Like it all comes into play. Do I think you should structure your show that it comes to a climactic build? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best way to do it. Do I think that is the end all be all and that you suck if you don't get it? Well, no. Also no. Uh, so I don't have great advice. I would love to hear what the general consensus is if you know it. But for me, I don't. I try to structure things so things build toward the end, but you know, I'm not pumping them for it specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense, and that's pretty much the vibe. Some folks are like, "Oh, you've got to do it so that your client knows that you did a good job." But I think that's still a holdover from old school live theater that most people as an audience don't know how to be a great audience, and they don't really know that a standing ovation is the thing
Hmm.
that the performer's aiming for,
Well, you have to train them
right? So
early if that's what you want. You have to get them for whatever reason clapping their hands early or being vocal early. You just have to show them up front that any reaction other than silence is also okay. You know, silence is also okay. Like I think you should put a pin on that. But also if you want something besides how somebody will normally react in a group of people, then you have to train them and show them that it's okay to do so.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oftentimes the venue does
So
that for you, right? If you have an MC, that's their whole job is to teach, train the audience how to respond.
that's a great point. Yeah, have somebody on your side
Hmm.
that isn't you.
Right.
Teaching the audience how to appreciate what you're about to come out and do.
Yeah, and I don't know the science to this, but I wonder if, having a live MC, you have a better chance of getting the audience energized than having like a voiceover intro. I'm sure that it has a big impact on it.
Hmm. Yeah, oh man, that's a whole can of worms too, because I'm the recorded voice intro camp
Hmm.
because of how many times I go to an environment where there isn't a trained professional and it's Eric from sales who's funny around the water cooler who doesn't really have a great grasp on live entertainment,
Well,
just making something up.
especially for what you do, it's important to have both. I'm sure you have a laminated written intro in your case and an audio file with the intro voiced over. I'm sure you have both.
Yep. That's the only way to do it.
That's
Yep.
all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, if you've got a good MC and somebody who knows how to work the crowd and to set them up for the right experience, yeah, that is fantastic. It's just that, boy, that is precious and rare.
Yeah, it's not.
Yep.
That's also one of the benefits of doing these magic venues. You often have that.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. And how does that contrast with the close-up work that you're doing? Do you have kind of a conversation with the person bringing you in? Hey, don't even mention that there's going to be a magician. Let me be just another person at the party, and people will slowly discover that I'm somebody fun to be around. Or do you say, all right, I'm going to mail you these table tents. They better be there so that people know who in the world I am when I show up? Like, where on the spectrum do you fall there?
I probably fall in the middle of that. I like them to tell. I like to be, a part of the event. I like people knowing that I'm there. But oftentimes, you'll spread very quickly through word of mouth. You know, one trick to doing stuff like that is to. I often like to do my first effect for the person who hired me. So I say, to get the night started, do you want to go grab a couple of your friends and we can start the magic right now just for you guys? And then almost every time doing something for them, it gets them excited, shows them what they just paid for. But then a couple other people will see you, and then you say thanks so much, and then that person can go off and do their hosting, know that they're in good hands. But now you focus your attention onto that next person who saw you. And so if you can build momentum early in the night, well, then it's really easy and you never have to break the ice. You're just jumping from person to person at this point. And once you get your first break, however many people in, well, those people will start to let other people at the party. Have you seen the magician? Have you seen Ryan? Make sure you go see Ryan. You know, Word will start to spread. It happens faster than you think, too.
Man, that alone is worth thousands of dollars because man, that solves a lot of problems and makes it way easier to be way better to make the event go way smoother than a lot of strategies I've heard people talk about.
Just do magic early for the person who paid you and make sure other people are watching. That's what I would say. And then it'll just it'll
It's
do
too
itself.
easy.
It'll
Too
manage
easy.
itself. Yeah.
That is a super valuable piece of advice for the folks that can have ears to hear it. That'll be worth a lot of money to them for sure.
I'll put a pin back on, the book stuff. The only thing I'll say about the act of putting out a project, for me, it's about moving on. Oftentimes I'll live with material for so long and I'll really work through it. And it's nice to be able to put a pin in it and kind of pass it down in some senses, kind of put your mark on it. Not saying that you're done with it, but saying that it's at the point where you want to start sharing it. It's a nice sense of now letting you move on to other problems that you want to solve. Okay, well, I feel like I've tackled this. feel like I have a good understanding on this, you know, but I kind of want to focus on these things now. And so part of it's documenting the journeys that I've been on that I feel like I've really started to find an ending to, but also something that like I actively want to share at that point because I feel like I've finished exploring it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Because you've put enough miles on it to know it inside and out, make every mistake that you have possibly made, and it's been rock solid for a long time. And then you kind of go, okay, I've gotten out of this what I'm going to get out of, and also interested in some other things. So now it's time for this baby to fly the nest.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good summary of it.
All right, so now what's on the horizon for you that you can talk about? Are you writing more books? Are you putting out more effects? Are you focusing on gigging? What's currently occupying your attention?
Well, since the pandemic has softened, I guess how I'll say it. Um, the focus has been on just working, you know, not working for a year and a half kind of makes you really want to work. So yeah,
Yeah.
the immediate past and future is working and gigging and building shows and tearing shows down and reworking shows and just trying new material. You know, I've thought about the idea of toying with writing some new, new stuff down. We'll see. That'll all happen over time. I don't have any like, big book that I'm about to announce, but I might start writing some stuff in the near future. I've kind of started to get a few ideas of things that I want to put on paper. Um, I guess another goal is to just start sharing more. So maybe we'll see me do a Penguin Live or a masterclass soon. Who knows? Can't announce anything, but we'll see. And finding another spot in Chicago to really do a lot more private work. So yeah, it's kind of here, there, and everywhere, but it's all magic centric and yeah, big things to come.
Awesome. And and for the folks that are vibing with the way you are thinking about things, where would you want to send them to get connected with you?
You can find me on Instagram at Plunk and Grind, the classic handle.
Nice.
You can also find me Ryan Plunkett _ official at Instagram. RyanPlunkett.com was the easiest way to get a hold of me. And yeah, hope to see you at a show soon. Come say hi.